I was hoping for Rocky music, but we'll settle for that. That's fine.
Well, welcome. And I can't think of many people who would create a standing room only session at the FT Weekend Festival. But Anthony Scaramucci, otherwise known as the Mooch, sometimes known as Tony. I'm told that if I call him Anthony, he says it reminds him of his mother.
You can call me anything you want. I've been called so much worse than those three things over the course of my life. You can call me anything you want, but it's a real pleasure to be here.
It's a great pleasure to be with you.
Thank you guys for being here.
And he has been somebody who has livened up the New York scene, the financial pages of the FT, the political scene for many, many years. I always think that if there is an apocalypse, I want to be close to you because you're one of life's great survivors.
Yeah.
Because
she basically just called me a cockroach, I think. Again, I've been called even worse than that, actually, too. So that's fine.
Well, for anyone who doesn't know, you spent years on the financial scene building hedge fund with a great deal of very effective self-promotion. You then went and became Trumpian during the first term.
I was the Trumpian. Was that self-promoting too, the Trumpian thing,
well, no? I think competing with Trump around self-promotion is never a good thing. But
I'm just glad I didn't get hit with now that Trump runs this place and apparently owns it, I'm glad I didn't get hit with a ray gun on the way in here. I was like, when I walked in, I thought maybe someone's going to fall on me. All right, well, I can keep going.
Well, anyway, and then you became famously or infamously the press secretary for all of, was it 11 days before he fired you?
Yeah, and I'm glad you said 11 because when people say 10, it does hurt my feelings. I mean, that's like 9.1% of my federal career. Why would you jip me out of that last day?
Well,
it was a fateful day. I got fired on that day.
So that almost cost you your marriage, although you did then get back together with your fantastic wife, Deirdre, who I adore.
It almost cost me my marriage.
It almost cost you your marriage, however.
But you know what? This whole thing has cost Trump his marriage, just so you know. But go ahead, keep going.
Well.
at least me and my wife still live in the same house together. All right, but go ahead, keep going.
As I say, you are the great survivor. You got your wife back, you got your life back, you're now back with your hedge fund, and you've become a great commentator on Trump because you've been on the inside, but you're now, if you might like, an insider-outsider who's both quite understanding of some of the reasons about why Trump got elected, but also pretty critical of many things too. So tell us, for starters, we call this Myths and Monsters, the Anthropology of Modern America. That's a sop to me as my background as a cultural anthropologist, but tell us what we need to understand about Donald Trump, your former boss for all of 11 days. Why do you think he is doing what he's doing today? And above all else, why does it suggest that the epistemology around his team, the way that people think, is so different from what most of us have grown up with and built our career in?
Okay, well, first of all, thank you for having me, and guys, I really appreciate you being here. I think where I want to start, if it's okay, is back in 2016, and so I did infamously work for the president for 11 days in the White House, but I had known Donald Trump in New York for 20 years. You never can tell somebody that you're friends with Donald Trump. If you tell somebody you're friends with Donald Trump, you either don't understand the relationship or you're trying to exaggerate the relationship because he's not a guy that you would describe as a friend. He's a transactionalist, and he's somebody that he doesn't view people the way normal people view people. They're sort of objects in his field of vision, and if he can transact with them and it benefits him somehow, great, and if it doesn't, he'll discard them very quickly. So I would never describe myself as a friend, but I want to lay this background for you so that you can understand why I went to work for him. And again, I would tell you right here, probably the biggest mistake of my life to go work for him, but weirdly gave me a platform to discuss what is happening right now so that hopefully it'll open the eyes and ears and minds of people to consider what he's doing and consider how dangerous what he is doing. And so I had to go through that sort of odyssey and some of the horrification of that odyssey. And if you're ever having a bad day and it's not health related, you should call me because it can't be worse than July 31st, 2017, when I got my ass fired from the White House, blown into Pennsylvania Avenue. I think the FT called me Tony Soprano on the Potomac, which is fine. I didn't mind that one.
Wasn't me, but yes.
I think Bill Maher called me a Jersey Shore cast member. I mean, it was really bad. And then, yeah, but you know, I had a PR person, like a crisis consultant. They said, okay, you got to go dark for the next 5 years, like move to Tuscany and reemerge with a beard or some shit like that. I was like, I'm not doing that. I'm going to be me. I went on like the Bill Maher show and, you know, he sort of figured out that I probably was a Jersey Shore cast member. I mean, the point I'm making is that when you have bad things happen to you, you got to get up off the canvas and you got to keep moving. And I think that's the big lesson of what happened to me. But I want to take you back to 2016. I'm working for Jeb Bush. I have spent 30 years in presidential politics, fundraising. I was a fundraiser for Bob Dole. I was a fundraiser for George W. Bush for 2 terms. I was a fundraiser for McCain. I was a fundraiser for Romney. How did I become a Republican fundraiser? Very simply, my dad's union out on Long Island was controlled by the Republicans. So if you're from Long Island here, you may remember a guy named Joe Margiotta. He was the Nassau County Republican chair. He controlled all the unions. And when I registered to vote, and back then you had to register for the draft and contemporaneous for the vote, I turned to my pops. I said, am I a Democrat or a Republican? Because I honestly didn't know. He said, you're a Republican. So I want to tie all this in. So I'm working for Jeb. Jeb is leaving the race. Trump is calling me. And he says to me, you promised me that if Jeb left the race, you'd come work for me. And I did. Back in March of 2015, when I wasn't taking Trump seriously, he met with me. And if you ever go to Trump Tower to meet with him, you're in his office. His desk is up here. Your chair is down here. Okay, I'm not making this shit up. Okay, and you're looking up at him, and he's there with the hands and this whole thing, and he's telling me he's going to run for president. And I told him he was full of it. He's not going to run for president. It's just a publicity stunt. And he says to me, well, if I run, and your guy, Jeb Bush, who I think has low energy, by the way, don't you think he has low energy? I said, actually, no, I didn't think he had low energy. But he knocked him out of the race. He called me, and he said, I want you to come work for me. You promised. I'm laying this as a backdrop because I've been in politics for 30 years as a fundraiser. But with Trump, you do everything. You provide media advocacy. You're doing fundraising. You're writing policy papers. Okay, this was a startup organization known as a political campaign. This was not a normal presidential campaign. I think you have Steve Bannon coming here. He'll tell you it was not normal. He joined the campaign I joined the campaign in March. He joined the campaign in August. Yeah. And so I can tell you it was not a normal campaign. And you know, we didn't collude with the Russians because we weren't even colluding with ourselves. Okay, so I know we didn't collude with the Russians, but it was a crazy thing. But this is an important part of this story. My first rally was in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I got off the plane and went to the venue, and there were 9,000 people waiting for then Mr. Trump. And so I took my Secret Service pin off, and I walked into the crowd to ask people why they were there. And people said to me they were there because the area was depressed economically. They were there because people had lost jobs. This one gentleman said to me, you know, Anthony, the factory that my dad worked in, I went to go work in 12 years ago. He retired. He has a pension. I got let go. You think you're in New Mexico, but New Mexico, okay, that would be Mexico because that's where that factory moved to. And I remember thinking, oh my God, I'm actually talking to my dad. My dad was born in 1935 in northeastern Pennsylvania. He was a laborer. He did not get formally educated. He was a very hard worker, and because of the middle class lifestyles that we were able to live in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, we had a house. It was small. I went to a good public school, and I directly benefited from that. And that was an aspirational working class family that I grew up in. What I saw in Albuquerque, New Mexico, were working class families that were once aspirational, Gillian, that were now
got smashed apart. Yeah. And so he really tapped into that blue-collar, working-class anger, which you understood because I said
they felt left out. They felt left out.
And it's something I've always told my colleagues and others, you know, is that I think, frankly, it's on us, as in the liberal, globalized elite, who fail to recognize the scale of problems and pain inside America, which Trump has tapped into. And that's really been the essence of why he pulled in so many votes and frankly pulled in someone like you. But talk to us about how Trump 2.0 has changed from Trump 1.0, what you saw, but also how Trump in some ways has inverted the whole thinking or the political tribal lines between Democrats and Republicans.
So I actually see it differently. I don't think he's inverted anything. I think he is a populist leader in the vein of Huey Long. He's an America First leader in the vein of the first America First movement, Charles Lindbergh. And I would suggest to you, it's almost as if Joseph McCarthy, the Wisconsin senator, and Charles Lindbergh had a baby, and they named the baby Donald Trump, and then they let Roy Cohn raise the baby. Okay, that's what you got. Okay, and I can thread that whole thing for you because he is a populist, he is a nationalist, he is an angry guy with a chip on his shoulder. Trump is a uncomfortable outsider. I'm an outsider, but I'm a comfortable outsider. I live on Long Island. There's a country club, there's a very famous country club on Long Island, like all the WASPs hang out on this country club. I mean, they would let me landscape this country club. I mean, they would never let me in the country club. But I don't care, okay? I don't care. Trump didn't get into that country club. He went out and built 18 country clubs. See what's going on? You wouldn't let him into your reindeer games as an elite person? No problem. I'm gonna go become the president of the United States to shove myself in a place where it's gonna irritate you for as long as possible. That's Donald Trump. So there's an anger there. But if you missize him, if you missize his intelligence, you missize his political instincts, his ability to observe the zeitgeist, if you missize that, you're going to do that at your peril. Because yes, he's not a super well-read person, but he is a very smart person. Richard Branson is a friend of mine from Virgin. I was at his house in the Caribbean in 2013. He once said about Trump, he may have attention deficit, he may have a learning disability, he may or may not. I'm just saying this to you, Anthony, because I have both those things. And so when you have those things, you have to garner your intelligence differently than other people. Maybe it's observational, maybe it's aesthetic, maybe it's a feel on a person's personality. Trump is very good at that. And Trump saw something that, frankly, I did not see. Again, I went to Tufts, went to Harvard Law School. I've hung out with Gillian, called it the liberal elite at Davos. And I've done all these things. And what ends up happening to you guys is that you get the collective biases of the people that you hang out with. And I lost touch with that neighborhood that I grew up in. And when I got to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I was reacquainted with the people that I grew up with, let me give you the newsflash, they didn't do as well as me. They shifted downward economically. When I boarded the Trump plane to head to Brentwood, we were doing a fundraiser in Los Angeles. I went onto the internet on the plane and I went to my dad's his local union. He was an operating engineer. I mapped out what the wages were. I looked over at Mr. Trump. I said, okay, so my dad's wages today, his 1976 wages would be down 26.5% here in 2016. 40 years later, you took people like my dad willing to work and you put them on an EBT card. You put them in a state of poverty. And these people are angry and these people feel left out of the system. And I blame the system because once Ross Perot threatened the system with 19.9% of the vote, the system became a tighter duopoly, more gerrymandering,
more control,
more operational control.
Yeah.
And then once they got the control of the thing, they became apathetic to the man and the woman on the street. And again, whether you like this or dislike this, those people would have voted for Lyndon Johnson, their grandparents. Their great-grandparents would have voted for FDR, but they had no one in the Democratic Party and they had no one in the Republican Party to go to. And he saw that and he exploited that.
So 2 questions then about today. 1, do you think that what Trump is delivering now is going to keep that working class vote on board? Because, you suddenly have a president who's telling voters they have to suck it up and only buy $2 at Christmas. You're telling a bunch of small business owners, entrepreneurs who I spoke to just the other day who voted for him and now seeing their businesses smashed apart by China tariffs. I mean, do you think he keeps them on board? Or is there anybody on the Democrat side who you think remotely gets it?
So, I mean, the short answer is yes, I do think he keeps them on board. I think that he will shapeshift over the next 6 months. He will, he's for the tariffs now. All this stuff is not planned. I was, in your event, there was a journalist that used something that
Robert Taco, yes.
Trump
always chickens out.
Yeah,
yes.
Taco, he said Trump always chickens out, but it's really not that. It's more taste. Trump always confuses everyone. And the reason why he does that is he doesn't really have a plan. He's never sat down and said, okay, here was the old world order, here's my plan. You know, I was on the plane with him once, and you know, he doesn't like to be lectured to, by the way, because if you start to lecture him, like, I won't tell you who it was a cabinet official, and the cabinet official was trying to explain the difference between a Shia and a Sunni to Trump. He got really pissed. Because, well, number one, he doesn't want you to think he doesn't know. And number two, you know, he's got a really smart brain and he's smarter than his generals. And so he's such an insecure guy that you can't explain things to him. Like a real smart leader would go to you if you knew more about the Middle East than him and ask the questions, not him. You know, and so he doesn't have a plan. And the reason why he doesn't have a plan is that he wouldn't even know how to put a plan together. He doesn't know what the Sykes-Picot Treaty is. He doesn't understand how the EU got constructed. I can tell you why he goes after the EU if you want, but he doesn't have a plan. And so what he does see is he sees an imbalance. He feels that America, at the end of the Second World War, should have set itself up differently. And so let me give you these two families, okay? Family number one kid is a blue-collar kid. He goes on and becomes very wealthy, and he decides to buy some cars for his family members. He pays for some tuitions. He pays for emergency medical expenses. That's family number one. Family number two, the guy becomes very successful. He builds a big mansion. He has a big swimming pool. And then he tells his family members, you know, you can come to the swimming pool, but you got to pay $25 to come into the swimming pool. That's Donald Trump. Does everybody understand that? That is Donald Trump.
And that's Donald Trump with the rest of the EU and the rest of the world. He didn't want to help them.
Doesn't want to help them. And so when you sit down with Donald Trump and you explain the neo-Victorian wisdom of Atkinson and Marshall and Eisenhower and Truman, and a lot of these guys didn't get along with each other, but they understood directionally where America needed to go at the end of the Second World War. They had read von Metternich. They understood the failure of the peace treaty at Versailles. Roosevelt in 43 and 44 in his diaries, Nigel Hamilton, if you want to read that trilogy, it's a great book. He talks about Roosevelt talking about the failure of Woodrow Wilson at Versailles and not getting the League of Nations passed by the Senate, and what he was going to do had he lived to get the UN Charter established. These men, Trump disrespects. He doesn't like the idea that America built out Europe with the Marshall Plan. Yeah. He doesn't like the General Agreement of Trade and Tariffs, which is the precursor to the World Trade Organization. So in that genre, if you read it, the GATT talks, all trade could flow relatively freely into the United States. We would accept tariffs and some level of protectionism from other countries as they were trying to reindustrialize at the end of the Second World War to create rising living standards around the world so that these rising living standards would lead to less conflict. That was the whole idea of these men and women that built the world order at the end of the Second World War.
And that's not him at all in terms of, but listen, tell me,
that's not him at all. He doesn't like it. He wants to wreck that. And he literally would like to wall America off, literally and physically, from the rest of the civilization. And that's their idea. They want to disavow the David Ricardo principle of free trade. They feel America's been ripped off. They literally want to stop as much immigration as they possibly can into the country. And when they use the 1890s, when they're speaking to you, that was a time where America produced and consumed 97% of the goods and services
inside America.
Inside of America. So that's what they're using. Okay, so that's effectively Brexiting America from the rest of the world. Okay, it's an Amexit. Everybody understand that? And Gillian can tell you, and the FT can tell you that when you make a decision like that, you weaken your country. You don't strengthen your country. You look at living standards in the UK as a result of the Brexit 9 years later. They've hurt themselves. But we did it for nationalism. We did it for the energy and the emotionalism about us being first. But the world is too integrated for that. This is not 1890. It's not even 1930. It's not 1950. In the year 2025, you want to build a Boeing aircraft, those parts, 60% of those parts, come from outside the United States.
So let me interrupt you for a second, because I want to ask you two quick questions. Firstly,
is this vodka, by the way, or no? Probably could use some.
Is Trump 2.0 different from Trump 1.0? Have his views changed? Have his methods changed? Or is he basically just the same, but unleashed?
He's sitting over there right now.
Well, he's probably not. He's probably over down in...
He's probably playing golf somewhere. But
he's probably down in Mar-a-Lago, actually.
Right, he's playing golf, and he's like, man, what the hell is actually going wrong? That's what he's saying to himself. And he's saying to himself, sometimes when the dog catches the car, the dog is barking and catches the car, then the dog's like, well, what the hell am I going to do with the car now? And that's Trump right now, because Trump one was, we're bringing in establishment Republicans and others, because I really don't have any governmental experience. I'm going to rely on them. And they stopped him from all of his worst impulses and all of his worst impulses. That tariff nonsense that you're seeing today, that was a 2018 idea. You know, Gary Cohen, my old colleague from Goldman, they handed him the executive order. They said, bring it to the Trump's desk. He looked at them, he ripped it up, he threw it in the garbage. I mean, that's well documented. Ask Bob Woodward. There were guys like Mnuchin. Stephen was like, hey, we're not doing that. So he'll be on to something else in 30 minutes. Let him go on to something else. General Kelly, if you see him walking around here, run up to him and kiss him or hug him. He's not really a huggy, kissy guy. The son of a bitch fired me, but I love the guy. Okay, he's a great guy. U.S. Marine, 4-star General, Gold Star family member. 18 months in that job probably saved America from a lot of the aggravation that you're seeing today. And so those guys are all gone. The spirit animal, the family spirit animal of Trump 1 was Jared Kushner. Now, if you know Jared, he's a more reasonable guy. He helped build the Abraham Accords. The spirit animal of Trump 2 is Don Jr. Okay, so here's the litmus test. Are you full MAGA, yes or no? Yes. Okay, are you going to listen to every single thing my dad says and wants to do? Yes or no? Yes. Okay, come into the administration. Right? If you look at Bessent at these meetings, like Richie Torres was asking Bessent yesterday at the meeting, he looked like he was eating a shit sandwich. Did you ever see the face? Because he hates the tariffs. He's written about the tariffs being really bad for the society and for the economy. His last investment letter as a hedge fund manager was explaining the economic principles why tariffs do not work, consistent with the Ronald Reagan speech about tariffs in the mid-'80s and the need for us to promote free trade and the need for us to stay more connected. Yet he's sitting there and the tongue is coming out of his mouth like a bow tie. You know, he gets so twisted because he wants that job. Guys, I've been there. I've been there. Some of you live here. That's Potomac fever. Potomac fever is I'm coming from outside of Washington, and I'm going to show Washington how it works. You know, the New Yorkers, I'm from Wall Street, I'm going to teach Washington. We're smarter than these people. The Silicon Valley people, I'm going to teach Washington. You know what the big problem with Potomac fever? You don't even know you have Potomac fever when you have it. Okay, I had Potomac fever. Lutnick has it. Bessent has it. Okay, they're absorbed into the power and the idea and the prestige of the job without understanding the purpose or the need for good policy.
So how does this end? I mean, what happens the next?
So
we're only, you know, just over 100 days. We have a long way.
There's three ways it could end in my mind, and I'll make a prediction. So the way it ends, and this is the way I predict it, I'll give you the first way first, okay? Trump is sitting there saying, okay, this is not going well. I'm going to pretend it's going well. I mean, he got his ass kicked in that debate with Kamala Harris, and I knew he got his ass kicked because he went right from the debate stage to Sean Hannity. He came into the spin room. I had helped her on that debate, and I saw him come into the spin room, and that was a sign.
Did he say hello to you?
That little, we have like a begrudging thing going between each other. He likes, trust me, he doesn't like the obsequious people. You may think he likes all of that, but he does not like, he laughs about that. Like he would literally be on the plane, he would say, oh, could you believe what that guy was saying to me?
Yeah.
You know that about him, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I know that about him. So we have a
Okay,
begrudging thing.
so it's not going well.
But he goes into the thing because he knows he's losing. So he's tripling down on that he's winning because he knows he's losing. Does everybody understand that?
Yeah.
So he's sitting there right now saying, okay, what is actually going wrong? And how do I get myself out of this? And how do I make it look like it's a win? Okay, and so he is leaning on Besant. He's talking to him every night. Trump's living alone in that 132-room mansion. And so he's on the phone, pillow talk with Hannity, pillow talk with Besant. You think I'm making this shit up, but I'm not. I'm not making this shit up because I know how this works, okay? And I think Scott's got the better of the two right now. Lutnick is too obsequious. It's like sort of, there is a nickname out there for him, and it rhymes with his name. You guys figure it out. I'm not going to use it on the stage. But I would just say this to you, that I think it ends up with a moderation of what's going on, which will slow down U.S. growth, will slow down U.S. businesses. There'll be a tug of war with the Fed. The Fed will eventually have to cut rates, which will be moderately beneficial to the economy. And I think that's what happens. And you're going to have a mini Brexit. It's almost like you're going to have a bad, let's say you got a shot or a vaccine and you felt bad for a couple of days after. You're not going to have the full-on Trump virus.
Okay. So that's scenario one.
Okay.
What are the other two?
Scenario two, it gets really, really ugly. He gets very Nixonian. He doubles and triples down on the dysphoria and the disillusion. He starts to detach himself from reality, and there's nobody in the room that can bring him back to the reality. And that'll be really bad because these guys will wait. They're very, very afraid of him. Okay, you're in the Kennedy Center. Jack Kennedy wrote a book called Profiles of Courage. They asked him about the book. They said, well, it was people that crossed their party to do something right for the country. And then one of the journalists said, well, why is the book so thin? He said, well, if I wrote Profiles in Cowardice, it would have been the size of the phone book.
Okay, so that's scenario two. So what's scenario three?
The third scenario is the best for us and the worst for him. 11 or 12 people actually cross lines. Okay, let me tell you what they have to be. You have to be about 4 or 5 senators, 3 or 4 members of the House of Representatives, 2 cabinet members. Let's use the number 11 because I sort of like that number. That's a good number. So let's say there's 11 people that cross and they say, okay, we're done. We're going to caucus with Schumer. We're going to caucus with the House, Hakeem Jeffries. 2 cabinet members say, I've watched this thing up close. It's not good. We'd like to invoke the 25th Amendment. And there's a weird, crazy scenario where he's impeached, he's convicted, and he's potentially tried for human rights violations. Now, you're sitting here saying to yourselves, no, that's ridiculous. That could never happen. But you also know what they're doing is ridiculous. And you also read in the first grade, at some point in your life, The Emperor Has No Clothes. And when you were 7 and the teacher was reading it to you, you're like, well, that's ridiculous. The guy's naked. Why aren't they telling him? And now you're living it. Now you're living it. So you actually know what he's doing is ridiculous, and you know what he's doing, and his minions, what they're doing, is ridiculous. It's not even American. It's so un-American that it's actually revolting to you, and it's revolting to half of the Republican senators. See, Gillian is a good journalist. She knows I'm not lying to you. She knows Republican senators get you on the phone, and they'll ventilate to you about how bad this is, but they won't do anything about it. But just imagine if 2 or 3 do, or 4 or 5 do. And you say this, right? But I just got interviewed by this Italian journalist outside. It looks like it's going great. But when they go too far It never ends great for these people. So those are the three scenarios.
Okay, so before we go to audience questions,
and by the way, I hope the third one doesn't happen. I think it'd be very bad for the country, by the way.
Yeah, well, I think, I mean, listen, none of the scenarios that we're looking at right now look good for the country at all. But that leads me to the last question before I go to questions from the audience. Is there anyone on the Democrats, amongst the Democrats, right now, who you think could actually appeal in an effective way to the working class base that essentially the party lost? The people who have basically congregated around Trump, is there anybody who you admire on that side of the aisle?
No. Let's go to the next question.
Okay, well, on that note, I'm going to then open it. I mean, that's, therein lies a tragedy.
I was fucking around. I didn't mean
Yeah. Okay, right, okay.
You got to play for some laughs up here, okay? So,
yeah.
So let me say this. If you're a Democrat in the room, you have to see your own party too. You're having a civil war in your own party. You're fighting over minute policies as opposed to purpose. And I would beg all of you to get into the room and say, hey, forget about the pronoun usage or this or that. AOC and Bernie, they're trying to search for a more perfect form of communism, okay? Country doesn't want that, okay? This is primarily a centrist country. Believe it or not, on religious stuff, it's actually center-right. If you really want to understand Trump's base is fiscally liberal. Let me repeat that to everybody. Trump's base is fiscally liberal. They are social conservatives. Nobody understands that better than Donald Trump. You have to understand what's going on in the country. Number two, get in a room together and say, okay, we're going to subordinate our internecine warfare to the greater good of the country and open the tent. Okay, you need to expand the tent. Make it a pro-democracy party, a pro-America party, an America renewal party, and bring in people that you don't like into the party. Stop canceling each other, okay? And remember your history. We had to do this once before in the 1850s. Had to do it. Buchanan was a shitty president. We didn't need to go to the Civil War. We could have abolished slavery without the war, but we went to war. We formed a new party, and that party was called the Republican Party. People remember your history. In 1856, we formed the Republican Party, and we went after the abolitionist Whigs and the abolitionist Democrats, and we opened up this gigantic tent for people. And the first Republican elected president of the United States was Abraham Lincoln. And he only got 43% of the popular vote. Go check your history. But we have to do that now. You don't like Chris Christie, too bad. Let him into the party. You don't like Liz Cheney, you want to cancel her. She was once with Trump, too bad. Open the tent.
Would you become a Democrat?
Find a leader.
Would you become a Democrat?
Would I become a Democrat?
For the first time, I have a question he can't immediately answer.
No, because I'm when you say that, I think Joe Margiotta got me a job on the Stone Dock at Gotham Sand and Stone when I was a kid. I needed the money to get through Harvard. I didn't have the money.
So it's tribal.
He gave me what's that?
It's tribal. Your loyalties.
He gave me $16 an hour. I would like to reform. He has taken over this party. This is a third party known as MAGA, M&A transaction. He put himself in charge of it. He decapitated the rest of the party. It's now, he's the rhino. I'm not the rhino. He's the rhino. It's the MAGA party, Republican in name.
Okay, so you want to reform the Republican?
I would like to reform the Republican Party, but if you found a leader in the Democratic Party that was willing to open up the tent, I would be interested in talking to that person.
Well, on that note, let's get some questions. We haven't got very long, so please keep them extremely short, and it will be courteous but not compulsory to just briefly identify yourself. I can see you want to go first, so. But please, very crisp.
Yeah, I'm Abhi. I'm from India. I live in DC right now. My question, just building off what you were saying, is what message do Democrats take to voters, especially voters who earn under $50,000, to bring them back on side? Because it seems like those voters are the one that shifted towards Trump in the last election.
Okay, so again, you have to take some of it. Look, remember, all creativity is a form of plagiarism and a little bit of a respin. Take some of what Trump is doing. See, with AOC and Bernie's doing, Trump is laughing about. You're playing like right into the guy, okay? He's inflaming you and he's triggering you, okay? And they're doing exactly what he would like them to do. So you have to try to get somebody who's a moderate, okay, he or she, and you got to get somebody to restate the principles of the Democratic Party. I know this is, probably a push because the world has changed a little, but it's like the Democratic Leadership Council that Bill Clinton was a part of. He understood that he needed to be in the middle and sort of to the right on a few things. Find that person. You can get those rallies done. There are young people, there are people in venture capital, people on Wall Street that would galvanize around that person. So steal from Trump's playbook a little bit. But that's what you would really need to do.
Right. Another question. Do we have any, got a question right at the back, the woman over there, next to the microphone.
This bow tie is fantastic, so we're getting to your question.
Does he have a question? Okay, we'll have a question from the bow tie after that. Yeah.
Hi.
Again, short.
Yes, my name is Caroline. I'm from Canada. If you were sitting in a room with a foreign leader like Canada or the UK, what would be your advice in dealing with Trump?
So what would you tell Mark Carney?
Okay, so I'm, full disclosure, I'm very close friends with Mark. I worked at Goldman with Mark. I've known Mark for 30 years. I was part of the Trump economic transition team and visited with Mark when he was at the Bank of England. And Mark sat for an interview with me and Alistair Campbell about maybe a week before that election for him to knock out Chrystia Freeland before the big election. So I would encourage you to look at that. But I would say Mark has handled him better than anybody. 3 quick things. Never take the phone call from him. Don't respond to him, okay? And tell people, elbows up, I'm ready for the fight. When you do that with him, he comes towards you. They did an event earlier today at 1:30. My advice is you got to push and shove with Trump. He's not, if you're overly kowtowing to him and laying down, forget it. Never going to work. And what Carney did was brilliant. He didn't call Trump after he won that interim election. Trump was like, what the hell is going on? Didn't call him. They called Carney. Carney said, I will only talk to him if he addresses me as prime minister. And if there's a communique post the conversation, it's the nation of Canada. If he starts his bullshit with governor and 51st state, I'm not taking the call. Does everybody understand that? And so that's what Carney did. And the meeting went quite well last Tuesday because Mark Carney knows how to forecheck in hockey. And you have to forecheck Donald Trump.
So the
Don't forget that.
Fourth thing is play ice hockey.
European leader, some leader in Asia, pick up the phone and call Mark Carney. He'll tell you how to deal with Donald Trump.
I'm failing that, the mooch.
Right.
Got a question over there from the man with the bow tie, I believe.
What's your view about Democratic centrists like Gretchen Whitmer or Gina Raimondo? Do you think they would be big tent people that could pull the Democrats together?
So everybody can hear the question. They're lovely people. I've met both of those people. They both know how to govern. They both have governed states. Okay, they're lovely people. They don't have the charisma. I hate to say this, they're just being brutally honest. This is now a popularity contest. You are in reality television world now. This is no longer a hiring decision for the American people. This is a popularity contest. If you told me, sir, tonight I can give Gina that job, she would do a great job. If you said Gretch is going to get that job tonight and she doesn't have to go through the primary process, she hurt herself with when she was holding up the thing. She should have done that. You got to be on your front foot. You say, hey, he's the president of the United States. I'm there to try to get money for my state, right? She doesn't have the right instincts for the world that we're living in right now. This is a podcast, reality television, 30-second soundbite on TikTok, and you better get people's eyeballs and you better get them to listen to what you're saying. They're both very talented, they're both very capable, but they don't have that pull, they don't have that Q factor with the American people.
Do you think a woman can actually get that level of popularity today? I hate to say this, but...
Wow, you're really going to get me in trouble with this. I was doing beautifully until you asked that question. People were enjoying the conversation.
You really expect an easy ride with me?
I was doing beautifully, Gillian. I do. I think there will be a woman president in my lifetime. If I were the Democrats right now, I would take a pause on the women for right now. Okay, because you put up 2 that did not win and they went up against Donald Trump, I would take a pause. Unless you're telling me we've got a superstar out there that we haven't identified yet. I do think we will get a woman in our lifetime, and people are not going to like this. I think it'll be a Republican woman. Because if you look at what happened in the UK, the two women that became prime minister in the UK were both from the Conservative Party. But I think we can get a
Nice, the
woman.
irony, yeah.
Okay.
Got a question there
Yes.
from a woman.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Leslie Ann.
Do you want to run for president? Because
Oh,
you,
no.
you got a great look for TV. You could probably do it. Okay, go ahead.
I'm a Brit living in DC. On your podcast last week, you mentioned about getting young people involved in politics, and you were encouraging them to get involved. How would you actually do that? What would you say to young people to become actively involved?
And by the way, just to be nice to you, those of you who don't know, he has a podcast with Katty Kay, which is wildly popular. So you can hear more of him.
Well, thank you for listening to the podcast. I appreciate it. I think it's hard. This is a 10-year project. It's not a 2-minute project. Americans want like instant coffee. You know, they want to instantly resolve the debt crisis. Can't do that. It's a 25-year. If you want to fix the deficit, you got to have a 25-year plan and get everybody to stick to it. But I think a 10-year plan, you got to go to the universities, you got to go to the trade schools, you got to go to the high schools, and we have to reignite the civic lessons that we were once taught in this country. And over 10 years, I think you could gravitate a lot of young people back into the thing. But I think it's very hard.
Okay, we haven't got much time left, so I'm gonna ask one more question myself. Would you run for office?
Look, man, look, Gillian, I'm running for re-election in my marriage, Gillian. I'm just really trying to stay married, okay? I mean, my wife hates Donald Trump almost as much as Melania hates him, and I'm talking, that's like really, I'm just trying to stay married, okay? We almost got divorced in the last fiasco, but, you know, there's no lane for me. I'm a pretty self-aware person. I couldn't run as a Democrat. I was once with Trump. They would cancel me immediately. I can't run as a Republican because that's now not even the Republican Party. There's no lane for me to run in, frankly, but I'm interested. You know, I told Kamala Harris, I just need one more day in the White House. I'll wash dishes. I want to have an even 12 days in the White House, don't you think? But no, I don't see myself running because here's the other problem. When you run, the lying starts. Don't forget that. Okay, you have no choice. Well, I'm running for office, governor, but the lying starts. And I've got 5 kids. I don't want to put them through that. Like, wow, my dad's on TV lying tonight. This sucks. You know?
Well, I think there are a lot of people in the audience who would feel sad that you're not running again, or not running. But if nothing else, we welcome your honesty. We certainly welcome the passion and spirit with which you enlivened that period.
And I love my country, Gillian. I went to work. Here's something I would like to say to everybody. When you make your mistakes, own your mistakes, but you can't let them hang on you. You know, it can have like a millstone on your neck for the rest of your life. But the mistake I made working for Trump was one of ego. And you got to be very, very careful with your ego. I grew up in a blue-collar family. I built 2 successful businesses, went to 2 fancy schools. I now have the chance to work for the American president. My family members said, don't do it. You and him in the White House, not going to work. Oil and water, don't do it. Did I listen to my family members? I did not. I listened to my ego, and I listened to my pride, because I wanted to fit that into my resume, my identity. And I tell you that as a cautionary tale. Don't put your pride and your ego into your decision-making, because the ancient Greeks are correct. That's where the hubris kicks in, and that's when you start to make decisions that are bad for yourself. And by the way, you can apply that to the world of investing. Don't put your emotions and pride into your investing either. And I think it's a big lesson for people, and I don't mind sharing with you the pain that I went through to learn that lesson, because I think it's instructive. Hopefully you won't have to go through that pain.
Well, I think we would all say a big thank you to you for your insight. Okay. For those of you who want to hear more.
Thank you. Appreciate everybody being here. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
And 2 quick lessons. Firstly, if anyone does want to hear more of him, basically the podcast is out there. It's very popular. It's very, very, very entertaining. And secondly, the biggest takeaway I take from today is that if we can tempt you back next year, we're going to need a bigger room.
Okay, deal.
So thank you.
Thank you, guys. Very nice to be here. Thank you, guys.
You are.